Welcome to the Sourcing Hero podcast, produced by UNA, a group purchasing organization that empowers sourcing heroes, and Art of Procurement, the world's largest procurement podcast network. I'm your host, Kelly Barnard. The goal of the Sourcing Hero podcast is to capture the epic stories of people who are rising up and beating the odds to create exceptional value within procurement, directly from those heroes themselves. Today, my guest here on the Sourcing Hero podcast is Omid Ghamami. He is the CEO of the Procurement and Supply Chain Management Institute, or PSCM to its friends. He's the innovator of the CPSCM certification program and regularly works with Fortune 500 companies to elevate their procurement and negotiation capabilities. So, hi, Omid. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Kelly. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I shared a little bit about your background and did my best to navigate the alphabet soup of all the different organizations that you're involved with. But share a little bit more about the listening audience so that they better understand your professional journey to this point.
Well, I spent 18 years at Intel Corporation. I ran their global corporate purchasing operations. And since then, I've had, I think, the best job in the world, which is working with, Fortune 500 type companies in 29 different countries to help transform them from a cost center into a value-added center of profit. And I learn as much from them as they do from me. So lots of fun.
Excellent. Well, I love the fact that you think you have the best job in the world. I imagine that not just myself, but a few people in the listening audience might take exception. I think as long as we all love the role that we play in procurement, we're all on the same team, right?
It's all good.
Now, one of the things that procurement often falls into that we're actually going to challenge as a preconceived notion today is when we get that mandate to go find savings, whether it's to deal with economic conditions or simply to hit our performance metrics, we automatically look outside of the company. We instantly think suppliers, we think sourcing in order to find those savings. But you're willing to make the case that there's some other places we should be looking. Where should we look beyond going straight to suppliers for savings?
Well, I'll touch on one of them that's really big. And I just kind of want to wake up the procurement community. We've been going and hammering people for better deals since the invention of currency. And that we've just gotten more sophisticated at it. But how many times can you keep going back to the same supplier year after year and say, make less money so we can report more savings? So we should always do that, but it's not where the money is, in fact. We've been working with clients on average 18% savings by focusing on the articulation of the demand. End users are not trained in creating cost-effective scope of work and specs. So as an example, we had one client that was selling a food product and they were selling it in single serving pouches. Well, the end user insisted that this has a zipper. But procurement was able to negotiate and say, listen, if it's single serving, then why do you need to have a zipper on it? By getting rid of that, they saved a tremendous amount of money. Another example was one of our clients was purchasing what's called 995 pure oxygen tubes for $100 a meter. It turned out it was over-engineered, and further analysis uncovered they could use 995, which was $6 a meter, $94 a meter less, or 94% cost savings. You're never going to get that in hammering suppliers.
No.
So we call that design for TCO. There's a lot of cheese down that hole.
I do love cheese. So you're preaching to the choir on that. Omid, let me ask you. So I like this idea about articulation of demand. So where we're actually going back to the business and saying, do we really need? Do we have flexibility? What type of relationship does procurement need to have with the business generally, with individual decision makers, in order for that kind of an approach to work?
So I've been in this for 30 years. And we are struggling with the same problems we were 30 years ago with business unit late engagement and not being aligned with procurement, all these kinds of things. And what you really need to know is procurement is only trained to negotiate with money involved externally. We're the only business unit inside the company that has exclusively this training. Everybody else has learned how to influence and negotiate without money involved. The legal department, they can't say, if you agree to this, we'll give you this much money. HR can't do it. Marketing can't. Nobody else can. And so it's no surprise when we go and try and influence internally, we struggle. And so the things we have to change, first off, we have to stop talking about procurement policy. Driving compliance nobody cares about procurement policy. And so the sooner we embrace that, the better we are. We have to, instead of talking about that, we need to focus on business unit objectives and business unit problems. And if we put our focus on that, which is why procurement exists, is enabling those things at the lowest total cost, then the business unit will start to engage us early, not because they have to due to policy, but because they want to, because it makes them better. And that is the secret sauce. And it shifts us from being a compliance-oriented or being perceived as salespeople to being trusted advisors. So that's the approach we need to take.
I like this idea about talking to the business about outcomes. And it reminds me of one of the regular conversations I used to have as a practitioner, where if you knew you were going to be talking to marketing about their spend, you had to sort of flip this switch and approach the conversation in a different way. Because if you went to marketing and talked about savings, the eyes glazed instantly and that meeting was going to be over. But really what we're saying is that some of those functions that are maybe more resistant to the traditional way procurement has of talking about things, we're in some ways teaching us how we should be talking to every single functional stakeholder within the business, not about policy, not about process, certainly not about procurement KPIs, but about what they are trying to achieve. And in order to do that, we need to understand their perspective better first, don't we?
For sure. It's unlike anything else. If somebody's trying to influence you using what's important for them, they're going to get nowhere. You have to influence focusing on what's important for the person on the other side. And that's the secret sauce to being a great negotiator, actually.
Now, the interesting thing about this idea of influencing based on different factors is that it is something that can start inside the organization and then actually also work its way out. So as we move from just delivering savings through our work with suppliers and contracts, and we're trying to deliver more value, we also need to think a little bit differently about those conversations.
Yes.
What are some of the more outcome-oriented things procurement needs to be thinking about, strategizing, researching, preparing for long before we sit down at the negotiating table with a third party?
So here's one of them is we have to start viewing the suppliers as the experts. And there's this risk, unfortunately, where business units and even procurement feels like the answer must come from within. That if it's somebody else's idea, they don't get the credit. So as a consequence, suppliers end up fulfilling, and I have seen this maybe 1,000 times. Suppliers end up fulfilling what they know is a problematic request. They know that the demand should not have been articulated the way it was, and it's either going to create cost or quality problems. And don't forget, when it's your idea, the supplier will want to be indemnified in the contract because they're wiping their hands clean. They're saying it wasn't our idea, it's yours. So if it works, great. If it doesn't work, it's your problem. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is really to start driving investigative negotiations and value to make the pie bigger. You have to understand what keeps the supplier awake at night. So we worked on this with one of our clients who was a potato chip manufacturer. They struggled getting discounts from the potato farmers year after year. So we worked with them on this. We discovered what kept the supplier awake at night was they only harvested potatoes 1 month a year, but they had to sell them 12 months a year. So we proposed shifting cold storage over to the potato chip company. Well, on average, the potato farmers suddenly were offering 20% extra discount. thrilled with this idea that's solving one of their problems. Then the last thing is, and I can't emphasize this enough, is to beware of comfortable suppliers. And suppliers get comfortable because you let them get comfortable. And there's this notion with both parties that once suppliers have gotten the contract, they've earned the deal. And that's completely fatal. They have to be told upfront that they have to re-earn the business every single month. Every single month, they must come back to you with, we just found another way to save you more money. We just found another way to make it better quality. We just found another way, so forth. And there has to be a meeting around that for our top suppliers. They cannot earn the business by signing the contract. They have to re-earn it every single month, and you have to force that agenda.
One of the things that you said a minute ago that I actually want to go back to is about this idea of allowing the supplier to be the expert. And as I start to sort of logic through what that means in practice, so I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to allow my supplier to be the expert in this category, whatever it happens to be. My second thought, of course, is, well, the business isn't going to like that because they think of themselves as the expert. So now I've got these two parties that both think of themselves as the expert, but that complicated situation actually very quickly creates an enormous opportunity for procurement as not the decision maker to sit between and facilitate and allow these ideas to go back and forth. Have we in some ways been limiting ourselves traditionally by trying to designate, one side or the other, or maybe procurement in some cases is going to be the expert versus sort of letting the battle happen in real time and simply playing a facilitator's role in it?
I think you're absolutely right. And first of all, I want to clarify, we should never abdicate our responsibility.
Absolutely.
To the supplier, but it's soliciting their input. And then I wouldn't consider it a battle either. I view it as idea generation. And you have to remember, procurement is buying 10 million different things. The supplier sells this all day long. And they have the benefit of having watched how other companies have done it. And business units are trying to solve these problems in a vacuum. There is no problem that a business unit is trying to solve that has not already been solved outside of that company 10,000 times already. There is no reason to try and invent a solution in-house. Absolutely none. Unless you're the first person ever to solve that problem, which is phenomenally unlikely. And guess who has the greatest insight to how this problem has been solved before? Suppliers. So instead of paying the big four consultants, $1 million to go and research this for you, just ask your suppliers, how do the people solve this problem? Do you have better ideas on how to do this? It's not abdication, it's idea solicitation. And by the way, if it's their idea, you can contractually shift the burden of performance accountability to them, which is a beautiful thing.
And it does also bring us back to your example, which I think is an excellent one, of the single-serve food package with the zipper on it. Why do you need that if it's a single serving meant to be consumed all at once? There are lots of different parties in that situation that could have come up with the idea, and maybe they did, and it just didn't get communicated. But the fact that that opportunity exists for procurement to speak up and say, I'm just thinking this through as a person who eats, crackers, pickles, whatever it happens to be. Do we need to pay for this zipper? It almost creates an additional opportunity for fresh eyes, plus different types of expertise, plus all of the different forms of ownership that go with these categories. It really does give you the sense that the opportunity for value creation is much more expansive, not just than savings, but than that we've ever thought about it as being before.
So you're absolutely right. And I'll just say this, the traditional sourcing person will seek to reduce costs. The sourcing hero seeks to surgically remove them. And that, to me, that's 100% cost savings. You get rid of the zipper. Traditional sourcing person will try and get the best price on the zipper. The sourcing hero looks to surgically remove it. So.
Now, as we move away from some of the traditional ways of doing things to maybe a more enlightened or bigger picture approach, One of the things that you and I had talked about previously was the idea of supplier relationship management and maybe how our attitude or our mindset about that needs to change. What do you think about the traditional ideas around SRM and maybe some of the opportunities to improve them?
So I have somewhat of an unpopular opinion on this, but I'm very strong-headed about it. I wrote a blog once called Rest in Peace SRM. And I don't know how SRM got into our lexicon, but I think it's because sales has CRM. And so somebody said we should do SRM. If the wheels are falling off off the bus in procurement, you can't tell the COO or the chief procurement officer, don't worry, we have a great relationship with our suppliers. That is not the goal. It's a means to an end, but it's not the end. The end is what I call SPM, Supplier Performance Management. That's what I care about. That's the reason we're in this business, is to attract performance at the lowest total cost. So we should not be talking about SRM. We should be talking about SPM, Supplier Performance Management. And then SRM is a component of that. It's a subset, but it is not the end goal. And I think the reason people are focusing so heavily on SRM is we're writing contracts for goods and services instead of for performance results. Mm-hmm. And then that creates problems post-contracts. And then you have to be a good relationship manager just to try and put out those fires, which is not where I think our profession should be. We should be preventing fires, not being really great at managing relationships to put them out. So hopefully I've articulated that well. SRM is not the end state. It's a means to an end. The end state is supplier performance. So I think we should be talking about SPM.
Well, the other thing I think we can challenge as part of this is the idea that it's SRM or SPM, right? Because we flip it around as you're suggesting. If we focus on performance and we're fair and transparent and working with the supplier in conjunction with the business to increase performance and satisfaction, at the end of the day, doesn't that naturally result in a better relationship with a good supplier?
For sure.
Yeah.
Sure, it results in a better relationship. And as further evidence, if you want to look at the business unit KPIs, they're certainly not measuring supplier relationship as one of them.
Yeah.
It can't possibly be one of their metrics, but for sure, supplier performance, cost, quality, delivery, these kind of things are their metrics. So the proof is in the pudding. And high-performing suppliers, it just comes with the territory. You're going to have a better relationship because you're spending time on building that and building strategy and innovation and breakthroughs instead of spending the time on, why did you deliver late? Why is the defects per lane so high? Why, and so forth. So you're absolutely right.
I do also think if we were to closely examine a lot of companies' SRM programs as they are a little more closely, we'd notice that that little leg coming down from the R that turns it from a P into an R is actually attached with duct tape. It's almost like we're trying to wrap our SPM program in hugs and fuzziness and whatever, but we're actually doing ourselves and the suppliers a disservice. This is business. You can have good relationships that are based on hard work and high levels of performance, but you make it much harder for everybody when you have to maybe play act this idea of, no, we're going to have a relationship first, and then everybody will work hard because they're so happy and love each other so much, when in fact, it's just easier and requires less energy if we can just say, what are the expectations? What are we trying to hit? Let's knock those expectations out of the park. Everybody wins, and you still get to the relationship anyway.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And by the way, I think over 95% of supplier performance issues emanate from within the walls of the customer's company, with procurement and with the end user. And if you articulate the requirements at the very beginning, before you ever engage the supplier, to be written for performance outcomes, then you go and solicit for them, then you go and negotiate for them, then you contract for them. There's a very high probability that you'll receive them. But if you engage in all those first steps for goods and services instead, then you're going to get goods and services and you'll have a poorly performing supplier, and then they get blamed for it. But in fact, they're following your lead. They're doing what you asked them to do. So the problem emanates from within. And I think there is misplaced blame on suppliers in most cases.
Yeah. No, I do agree with you because no supplier wants to perform poorly, right? Every supplier wants a contract renewal, a contract expansion, right? Full consumption of demand. Now, Omid, you started to get close to this a minute ago, but I want to formally bring you into the tradition here at the Sourcing Hero by giving you a pair of questions. You can pick either one, and then there is no wrong answer to either question. Mm-hmm. So your choices are, what does the idea of a sourcing hero mean to you? Or what do you think heroism looks like in a business context?
So I'm going to pick the first one because I love the name of your podcast and I've kind of been noodling on this. I'm going to first answer something you didn't ask, which I'm going to answer what I think the sourcing loser is.
Oh, interesting. This is a first. I always say I never know what answer I'm going to get. This is officially a first. We've never had a definition of a sourcing loser before.
We need to know what not to aspire.
That's true.
And I see this a lot from smart, capable people. The sourcing loser has 1 year experience 20 times, and they've gotten better and better at doing what they were taught originally. That's one key attribute. The second key attribute of the sourcing loser is the one who feels that every new idea, every innovation, every different way of doing things, they have to go and take it to an MRC, a management review committee, or they got to go get their bosses buy-in, or they got to go to the commodity management team to get buy-in. The sourcing loser, is the one who waits for somebody else to crown them. The sourcing hero, and by the way, I'm not just preaching this, I live this. The sourcing hero is the one who's unafraid to crown themselves. The sourcing hero is the one who finds an innovation. They talk to people outside of their company, and they have found that they've been able to achieve something by doing X or Y or Z, and they just go do it. They don't announce, hey guys, starting Monday, I'm going to do this. They don't go to a management review committee. They don't go to the commodity teams. They just go and do it. And they crown themselves. And I promise you, the people who do this intelligently, what happens next is they start to get sought out as an internal consultant. Others will figure out you're getting better results. They start to come to you. And then the promotions just happen and you become a highly in-demand commodity. You'll never have to look for a job again. The other aspect of a sourcing hero is they know how to negotiate without money involved. And I call that influence. And I think the ability to influence is the most important skill that defines the success or failure of procurement professionals. And we've got a great crutch with this money thing. The money is doing so much of the work for us that our skills can languish. The more money you're spending, the more your negotiation skills languish because the money's doing so much of the work for you. So the sourcing hero is the one who learns how to influence and drive change in people because they want to without money involved. And the best practice ground of that in the world for that is internally with finance, legal, the business units, manufacturing. We have to get good at that. And today we're struggling at it. So that's kind of my quick and dirty summary.
Well, I love hearing something new. I appreciate your thoughts on both sides of that line, right? The what not to do as well as the what to do. Omid, if people are meeting you for the very first time through this conversation, what is a good way for them to reach out or to connect?
Okay, so they can go to our website, PSCM Institute for Procurement and Supply Chain Management Institute.com. They can go to my LinkedIn profile. I'm the only one in the world with my name, Omid Ghamami. And then if they're interested in in-house training or in-house CPSCM certification or consulting services, just to find out more, they can send an email to my team at support@purchasingadvantage.com.
Excellent. Omid, thank you so much for sharing your time and expertise.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sourcing Hero podcast. Join us again next time for more true stories of sourcing and business heroism performed by your colleagues and peers. Look for The Sourcing Hero wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe. Finally, don't forget, sourcing heroism is taking place all around us every day. Keep your eyes open and you're bound to see it. Until next time, I'm your host, Kelly Barner. Stay well, and always remember that you can be a hero too.